back to Zero Sum Gaming here at the Culture Cache. We have a Patreon request for the 4th time in a row. Guys, seriously, I want to thank you. Patreon plays a large part in keeping the lights on here at the Culture Cache. Or is that keeping the servers running? Anyway, Tainty has requested Breath of Fire 3 because it's her favorite game. Let's check it out and see what it has to offer. People often think of the Breath of Fire series as the B tier of RPGs. It's not that they're bad games, and they're not, but that there are others you should play first. Generally, I agree with this statement, and we'll see many reasons why over the next few minutes. Let's get the obvious out of the way first, the graphics. By and large, the Sony PlayStation has not aged well in the graphics department. 2D games fare better than 3D ones though, and that's a strength of this game. For example, Final Fantasy VII was lauded for its graphics. In 1997, 18 years later, we can't ignore that all the characters look like they belong in Popeye cartoons, and that says nothing of the lack of texture maps. While Breath of Fire 3 didn't get the same praise for its graphics back then, they've aged much better than FF7. The mix of 2 and 3D is the main reason for this. Don't get me wrong, BOF3 has its own graphical imperfections, such as trees being composed of 3 intersecting planes of leaves to create the illusion of depth, but the sprites still look good today. My gripe isn't with the graphics, rather it's with the camera. It's semi-fixed at an isometric position, but you can move it a bit at will. Your freedom in this regard is greatly stifled, as you can only move it about 10 degrees in any direction. You'd think that such a limited range wouldn't be useful, but it is. This game loves to hide treasure just barely out of view, meaning you'll want to move the camera around a lot. Unfortunately, you can't move while the camera is moving, nor will the camera stay where you want it. As soon as you let go of the button, the camera reverts to its original position. It's not the worst camera I've ever encountered, Sonic, but it's still not very good. What about the music? It's a bit of a mixed bag, ranging from great to forgettable. There's nothing bad in the mix, but some tracks are a bit bland and just sort of fade from the recesses of your mind quickly. I really do like the battle and victory themes, both overworld themes, the fishing theme, more on that in a sec, and the title screen, among others. But the selling point of this game certainly isn't the soundtrack. I do really like the sound effects in this game. For example, blade-based attacks have a very crisp, Japanese cutting sound. It honestly sounds like it could have come from a samurai drama. Nina's magic outside of combat inspires players with wanderlust and charm, and it has a cute sound associated with it. Best of all, high-level thunder magic, like Mjolnir, really booms and sounds truly threatening. The voices are great. They're still in Japanese, so some small details may be lost here in America, but even then, they're not bad. The grit, determination, and even pain come through every time. I'm sure some people will find them repetitive, but I never do. My favorite is what Ray says when using Pilfer. I use that attack almost every single turn with him, so hearing him say, "Itadaki," is kinda like my comfort zone. It's also pretty revealing into the nature of his character. He's actually saying thanks in a semi-brash or sarcastic way, such that it comes across as lucky me. This is priceless when you consider that he's stealing from the enemy as he does this. It's great! Speaking of Ray, let's examine the characters in this game. There are 7 of them. This game does have Breath of Fire in the title, so obviously Ryu is the main character. He has the ability to transform into a dragon and is a very flexible character. You can develop him into a primo physical fighter, a powerful mage, a backup thief, or really, almost anything you want. He's not truly a blank slate, given that he primarily learns healing and assist magic naturally, but you can have him fill almost any desired role with the right build. Just be sure to keep him away from one of Capcom's other games. In case you've forgotten, in which case, get help. Seriously, I said this only like a minute ago. Ray is a thief. Agility is his strong suit, and he's okay with physical and magic attacks, but he tends to have low defense. Still, Free items nearly every turn makes him a powerful character. Itadaki! Tipo is the only character without a decent voice. I can't really explain why, but it's like a cheese grater on my eardrums. Anyway, he's a lot like Ryu in that he's an all-rounder, but instead of learning white magic by default, he learns attack spells. Next is Nina, another mainstay of the Breath of Fire games. As expected, she's the Princess of Windia. This iteration of Windia is strange. They demand you get permission from the king in order to travel. Papers, please. Anyway, she's the glass cannon of the group, but not a very good one. Her physical attack, defense, and HP are all way too low to be useful, and attack magic in this game, Nina's strong suit, just isn't powerful enough to make her a viable character. You probably won't use her much outside of instances where she's forced into your party. Momo is like Nina in that she's pretty frail, but she's unlike Nina in that her perks are much more useful. For starters, she learns some functional healing and buff magic, making her a decent addition to your team in most circumstances. Aside from that, she has a very powerful physical attack, since she wields a bazooka as her weapon. Fun! But be warned that using Momo can be frustrating at times. Her base accuracy is only 70%. Meaning that she will miss fairly frequently. Peko is one of the most unique characters in any game ever. He's a sentient onion. How often can you say you've seen one of those? He's another of my favorite characters. His HP and defense are incredibly high, making him a perfect natural tank. And that's before you account for his natural regeneration. Peko automatically recovers 3% of his HP per turn in combat. Considering his naturally high HP growth, this is significant free healing. It's not all sunshine and roses for this onion though. He is very slow, and his low intelligence means magic will tear him apart easily. Still, if given the choice, my team usually consists of Ryu, Rei, and Peko. The concept of an onion that can first charm you and later disembowel you is one of the funniest in any video game I've ever played. Finally, we come to Gar. Gar has the highest attack in the game, and very good defense and HP as well. He edges out Peko in intelligence and agility, but his extremely low AP means you won't be able to use his skills very often. By the end of the game, I've literally seen Nina gain more AP for a single level up than Gar had total. You can somewhat mitigate this by giving him a bunch of 0 AP skills, but this is still a restriction other characters don't have to deal with. Gar has natural resistance to fire, and he also has another interesting and unstated ability. Battles in Breath of Fire 3 take place right where you are when they occur. Think Chrono Trigger, but with random battles. Because Gar is so large, he sometimes prevents fights from occurring in extremely tight quarters. Speaking of the battles, let's go over how they work. Pay attention to the order in which your characters get to choose commands. This will be the same as the order they're executed in, so you can plan accordingly. You have your typical RPG stuff, such as fight, escape, defend, item, ability, and auto battle, plus a command called examine. Fight is your regular attack, represented by the sword icon. Escape lets you run away and is, fittingly, depicted as a boot. Defend, shown as a shield, reduces damage you take. Item, which looks like a jar, allows you to use your consumables. The ability icon is a staff, and, you guessed it, it's how you cast your spells. The crossed sword symbol is for auto battle, which just opts for regular attacks from all of your party members for the duration of the battle. Examine is the one that sets this game apart. It looks like an eyeball, and it offers you the chance to learn enemy commands. You do burn the turn of combat you use examining, and you have to choose a specific enemy, but if that one uses an applicable skill, there's a chance that your character will learn it. For more information on skills, check out the companion article hosted at theculturecache.com. There's a link in the description. For now, suffice it to say that skills let you tip the scales to your liking when it comes to character growth. You can load up a character with similar skills to what he naturally learns, or you could instead augment a character's weaknesses by filling in the gaps in her arsenal. It can be very frustrating when your characters repeatedly refuse to learn skills you want, but it's worth the effort in the long run. For some reason, I feel obligated right now to tell you about the fact that this game can be played with one hand. Get your mind out of the gutter. In all seriousness, this is very useful because it allows you to create maps while you play. Or masticate. That means eating! Sadly, there are quite a few little annoyances in this game. For instance, the text absolutely crawls onto the screen. I like that certain words will shudder or be written in red and things like that in order to help emphasize specific emotions being conveyed. But if you're a fast reader or even a medium speed reader, the molasses with no sense of urgency text will get on your nerves. This pace seems to affect nearly the entirety of the game. While this is common among PS1 games, there is a noticeable hiccup of load time every time you enter a new area, check your menu, or most frequently, begin combat. Normally this would be forgivable, especially considering the age of the game. But when you already have text that makes pond water look hasty, you can't ignore it. The game can also be downright unfair sometimes. Whenever the opponents have initiative, you'd better pray to God or Miria or Poseidon or whomever you worship, because you have a reasonable expectation of death, even if you came into the battle with full HP. The first time this happened to me was in the Windian Catacombs. I got ambushed by a Thunder and 3 Volts. They each used a decently powerful lightning spell against my party, and I was dead before taking a turn. And yes, I had full HP coming in. You often have to go quite a while in between saves. This can be a bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, this sends your frustration into the stratosphere if you die and lose over an hour of progress. But it does create the proper sense of dread in the player and makes the dangerous situation the characters are in all the more real. And then there are the mini-games. I understand what they were going for. A common attack of the RPG genre is that all you do is press the A button until you win. While that's often technically correct, it's ignoring any semblance of resource management, planning, timing, foresight, and even luck. And all that still says nothing about the story, which is a major component to the popularity of RPGs. Capcom tried to defy this by including these minigames, but mostly they just suck. They feel tacked on and pointless. They're obtuse, and some are surprisingly difficult. Oh, and if you do lose, you have to sit through all that text at its typically brisk snail's pace again. Well, okay, they're not all bad. 2 of them are truly a lot of fun and offer an amusing diversion from the main story. The first is practically required in the Breath of Fire world. Fishing has been around since the first game, and it's more fun now than ever. Seriously, I spent about a third of my time with this game screwing around at the various fishing locations. It's a challenge in its own right, and it's fun to beat your own records. Best of all, it has immediate and tangible benefits. Each fish you catch has a use, whether it be blinding all the enemies, healing your AP, or many other varied outcomes. You're required to fish as part of one quest, but I suggest you grab your rod at every opportunity. The Fairy Village is also great. It adds a fun sim element to the game. It doesn't feature anywhere near as prominently as, say, ActRaiser, but it's great to watch them develop and grow. Each fairy has 4 stats: Outdoorsman, Construction, Charisma, and Intelligence, represented by colored bars. You can assign each fairy to one of many different jobs to best suit her needs, as well as that of the village as a whole. Of course, it wouldn't be an RPG without rewarding the player for selflessly helping strangers, and it doesn't disappoint in that regard. Some items, such as the powerful Ivory Charm, can only be obtained here. It'd be worth it if only to get such a great piece of equipment, but honestly, it's a blast in its own right. I think that's a question that probably needs a little more time and depth than a couple of lines of text on a video game screen. What do you think? Actually, that line is somewhat important to the story. At first, I wasn't too crazy about the story in this game. Too often, control is taken away from the player as events in the game force you on frequently, especially early on. Believe me when I say there's a ton of Deus Ex Machina in this game. But honestly, as it gets going, that may be on purpose. Maybe I'm giving the writers too much credit here, but considering what a large role religion and technology play, especially near the end of the game, I'd like to think that they intended that as a fun little tongue-in-cheek pun. As I said, the story does have its flaws. Like the gameplay, pacing issues abound. Much of the game also feels like familiar ground you've already trod if you've played Breath of Fire 2. It's not quite the same, but still very familiar. Breath of Fire 2 is a bit more heavy-handed with the religious elements, and the villainous Church of St. Eva more closely resembles Christianity in BOF2, while 3 mixes in the technology element to distinguish itself, among other things. It's also closer to Islam this time around, going so far as to demand your submission, which is exactly what Islam means. Sadly, this is where the pacing is so far off. Too much of the story happens right at the end of the game to honestly call it a driving force. The narrative is just too ADD. Hey guys, let's go meet God. Great, but let's visit this greenhouse first. Okay. When the story does kick into high gear, in literally the final dungeon of the game, it's fantastic. When our heroes finally approach God, known in this game as the goddess Myria, we learn the truth about the technology of the world. Myria has intentionally stunted the world's technological growth, and, like any politician, it's for your own good. As a quick aside, you should never trust anyone restricting your freedom for your protection. And I'm saying that not for you, but for me. I don't want my liberty restricted, especially for the illusion of safety. Myria's Global Directive 10289 is immediately questionable. Ray rebukes her, asking, "So, what you're saying is we should just sit back and let you take care of us like we were your babies or something, right?" She claims she doesn't want anyone developing technology that could be weaponized. For their own safety, of course. But this argument is null in a world where teleporters and bazookas already exist. It's much more likely that she prevents progress only for personal preservation. The real-world allegory is refreshing. Nanny-statism doesn't work. Gun control is a bad idea. Don't cede your power and freedom over to anybody. It's true that it's a religion lording sovereignty over the characters in this game, but the parallel to government should be immediately obvious as well. And interestingly enough, Myria may not even be a god. At one point, she actually cries out to God. No other characters are around for this moment, so she's not saying that as deception. Curiously enough, Myria seems to be advocating a zero-sum game for existence. This is an economic concept, too deep to get into in this already long video, but here's the crash course. Zero-sum games require someone to lose in order for someone to win. Poker, for example, is a zero-sum game. If 2 players start with 50 chips, in order for one player to gain, another must lose. Many things in life are zero-sum games, and there also exist positive and negative-sum games. A free market economy is a positive-sum game, because the trade only occurs if both parties benefit. A command economy is a negative-sum game, because the value of the trade is less after it occurs. Even if one party does benefit, the total payoff is lessened by definition because of the command of the third party coercing or even forcing the trade. And now you know! And knowing is half the battle. The story that takes place over the first 3 games reveals an interesting chronicle on its own. You can actually watch as the dominant religion changes. In Breath of Fire, the dragon religion is everywhere, with most cities hosting a shrine to it. In Breath of Fire 2, the dragon religion clearly takes a backseat to the Church of St. Eva. It's there, but it's secondary. By Breath of Fire 3, the dragon religion has been relegated to a mere footnote in history. There are only a handful of dragon statues still around, and they're mostly relegated to the level of superstition, not really a religion. The anal retentive, detail-oriented history teacher in me loves little touches like this. So, is this game worth it? The going rate on Breath of Fire 3 is about $27. Yes, I did mention some of the flaws with this game, and they needed to be shown. This game fits squarely into the B tier of PlayStation RPGs, and honestly, I think it deserves to. Having said that, it is a game worth both your time and your money. While there are some RPGs I think you should play first, this one is definitely worth the price of admission, so check it out when you get the chance. Thanks for watching.
Goodbye.
I promise I'm not crying. I'm just standing too close to Pecco.